Dr. Marcus Kane had been studying the unique flora of Verdania Prime for 8 months when he stumbled upon the most remarkable specimen he'd never expected to find, a member of the Nisari royal family living in perfect harmony with the planet's pristine jungle ecosystem. He'd been tracking the migration patterns of the luminescent orchids that grew in the forest canopy when movement caught his peripheral vision. At first, he thought he was observing some form of native wildlife. The figure moved with such fluid grace through the dappled sunlight that she seemed to be part of the jungle itself. Then she turned, and Marcus found himself looking at unmistakably intelligent violet eyes set in features of extraordinary beauty. Her skin held the characteristic blue-green luminescence of the Nisari, and the elegant bone structure of her face marked her as nobility even before he noticed the intricate silver markings along her arms that indicated royal bloodline. She was also completely unclothed, which sent Marcus's scientific objectivity into immediate conflict with his human cultural conditioning. "Oh," he said, instinctively averting his gaze while his mind scrambled to process the situation. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I should have announced my presence." The woman tilted her head with curious confusion, her expression suggesting she didn't understand his discomfort. "Why do you look away?" she asked in accented but fluent standard. "Have I done something to offend you?" Marcus kept his eyes carefully focused on the trees above her head, trying to maintain scientific professionalism while his training in xenoanthropology reminded him that clothing customs vary dramatically between species. "Not offended," he managed. "Just trying to be respectful. I'm Dr. Marcus Kane, xenobiologist with the Verdania Research Consortium. I was studying the orchid migrations when I accidentally intruded on your habitat." "Habitat," she repeated with what sounded like amusement. "An interesting term. I am Zara Lynn. And you are the first human I have encountered who studies our forests rather than seeking to change them." Something in her tone made Marcus risk a careful glance at her face, noting the intelligence in her eyes and the regal bearing that seemed natural rather than practiced. "Zara Lynn," he said slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind. "Princess Zara Lynn of the Nisari hegemony." "Former princess," she corrected gently. "At present, I am simply someone who has found peace in the green growing places." Marcus's scientific training warred with diplomatic protocol as he realized he was speaking with a member of alien royalty whose disappearance had been quietly noted in research community briefings. Princess Zara Lynn had vanished from her homeworld 6 months ago, sparking discreet inquiries through diplomatic channels. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I should inform you that your family has been concerned about your whereabouts. There have been inquiries." "I know," she said simply. "But I am not ready to return to the crystal palaces and political marriages that await me. Here, I can think clearly for the first time in my life." Marcus found himself in an impossible situation. Professional ethics demanded that he respect her privacy and autonomy, but diplomatic protocol suggested he should report her location to appropriate authorities. Meanwhile, his human cultural background made it increasingly difficult to maintain eye contact while she remained unself-consciously natural in her appearance. "Dr. Kane," she said, apparently noticing his continued discomfort, "does my appearance disturb you in some way? I have studied human customs through your entertainment broadcasts, but I confess I do not understand the significance you place on artificial coverings." "It's not that you're disturbing," Marcus said quickly, then realized his phrasing might be misinterpreted. "I mean, it's a cultural difference. Humans typically wear clothing for various reasons. Practical, social, cultural. And these reasons make my natural appearance problematic for you." Marcus looked at this remarkable being who combined royal grace with innocent curiosity, trying to find words that would bridge the gap between their cultural perspectives without suggesting that either approach was wrong. "Not problematic," he said finally. "Just different from what I'm accustomed to. In human society, unclothed appearance typically indicates either intimacy between individuals or specific contexts like medical examinations." "Ah," Zara Lynn said with the tone of someone solving an interesting puzzle. "So my appearance suggests social contexts that do not actually exist between us, creating confusion about the nature of our interaction." "Exactly. How fascinating. Your species has created artificial social signals that override direct communication about intentions and relationships. Marcus smiled despite his discomfort, recognizing the anthropological insight in her observation. It's more complicated than that, but yes, humans do rely heavily on visual and social cues to interpret situations. Zaralyn moved closer, her movements carrying the fluid grace that he'd initially mistaken for wildlife behavior. Dr. Kane, I propose an arrangement. I will respect your cultural sensitivities by maintaining appropriate distance during our conversations. In exchange, you will treat me as a research colleague rather than a missing person who requires official reporting. Your Highness. Zaralyn, she corrected. I am taking a sabbatical from being a princess. At present, I am simply someone who has spent 6 months learning to live in harmony with this remarkable ecosystem. Marcus found himself studying her with growing fascination. Princess Zaralyn radiated a peace and contentment that seemed genuine rather than performed, and her integration with the jungle environment spoke of someone who had found exactly what she was looking for. What did you find here? He asked. In the jungle, I mean. Silence, she said immediately. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of demands, expectations, and obligations that had nothing to do with who I am or what I want. And what do you want? To understand the natural world without political implications. To make choices based on my own values rather than strategic necessities. To discover who I am when I'm not representing anyone except myself. Marcus understood the appeal more than he wanted to admit. His own choice to work in frontier research had been motivated by similar desires to escape the academic politics and career pressures that characterized university life. How long can you maintain this sabbatical? Until I decide I'm ready to return. Or until circumstances force the decision. She looked at him directly, her violet eyes holding depths that suggested both wisdom and vulnerability. Dr. Kane, will you force that decision by reporting my location? Marcus considered the question, weighing professional obligations against personal ethics and scientific curiosity. Princess Zaralyn had found something in this jungle that had clearly been valuable to her personal development, and she wasn't asking him to participate in anything illegal or harmful. I won't report your location, he said finally. But I reserve the right to reconsider if circumstances change or if your continued absence creates problems that affect other people. That seems fair. And in return? Zaralyn smiled, the expression transforming her face from merely beautiful to genuinely radiant. In return, I will share my knowledge of this ecosystem that your research consortium has been studying. 6 months of direct observation has taught me things about Verdania's jungle that your instruments might miss. Such as, the orchids you're tracking don't migrate randomly. They follow lunar cycles that correlate with the reproductive patterns of the canopy-dwelling symbiotes that pollinate them. Your research has been measuring the wrong variables. Marcus stared at her, realizing that Princess Zaralyn had just offered him a research breakthrough that could justify months of work. How could you possibly know that? Because I've been living with them for 6 months, watching their behavior patterns without the interference of electronic monitoring equipment or the assumptions that come from studying them from a distance. You've been conducting field research. I've been learning to see the forest as the forest sees itself, she corrected gently. The research applications are a bonus. As they began discussing the behavioral patterns she'd observed, Marcus found himself relaxing into the kind of scientific conversation he'd always enjoyed most, collaboration with someone who brought unique perspectives to shared problems of understanding. It wasn't until an hour later that he realized he'd stopped being distracted by cultural differences and started appreciating the remarkable intelligence of someone who had chosen to study an alien ecosystem through direct immersion rather than technological mediation. Princess Zaralyn might have been unclothed by human standards, but she was clearly anything but unprepared for the life she'd chosen to build in Verdania's Green Cathedral. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Princess Zaralyn established a routine that satisfied both his scientific curiosity and her need for intellectual stimulation without forcing either to compromise their chosen lifestyle. He would arrive at their agreed meeting spot, a small clearing beside a waterfall where the orchid populations were particularly dense, with supplies and equipment, while she would share observations and insights that consistently surprised him with their depth and accuracy. The symbiotes are more intelligent than your research protocols assume, she explained during one of their sessions, gesturing toward the luminescent creatures that seemed to dance among the canopy flowers. They communicate through bioluminescent patterns that coordinate pollination timing across vast distances. Marcus looked up from his data pad, where he'd been recording her observations. Communicate how? Watch. Princess Zaralyn moved to the base of a massive tree and placed her hands against its bark, her own bioluminescent skin beginning to pulse in subtle patterns. Within moments, the symbiotes in the canopy above began responding with coordinated light displays that rippled from tree to tree. You're communicating with them? My people evolved from similar organisms millions of years ago. We retain some capacity for biological communication that your species never developed. Marcus stared at the light show above them, realizing he was witnessing a form of interspecies communication that human science had never documented. This is extraordinary. You're essentially conducting real-time conversations with the forest ecosystem. Not conversations exactly, Princess Zaralyn corrected, settling gracefully onto a fallen log with the unself-conscious elegance that had initially made Marcus so uncomfortable. More like, participating in the emotional resonance of the forest. Sharing in its awareness of seasonal changes, growth patterns, environmental stresses. Is this why you chose to live here? Because you could communicate with the ecosystem? Partly. But also because here, I am simply another part of the forest rather than a political symbol representing concepts I never chose to embody. Marcus had been carefully avoiding personal questions about her reasons for leaving royal life, but something in her tone suggested she was ready to discuss it. What concepts? He asked gently. Princess Zaralyn was quiet for several minutes, her violet eyes focused on the play of light and shadow through the canopy. When she spoke, her voice carried a weariness that seemed too profound for someone so young. Unity through strategic alliance. Cultural preservation through selective breeding. The sacrifice of individual desires for collective benefit. She looked at him directly. My marriage to Prince Thexval of the Centauri Nisari was intended to prevent a trade war between our systems while preserving the genetic markers that produce our strongest bioluminescent abilities. An arranged marriage. A political necessity disguised as an arranged marriage. Prince Thexval is intelligent, powerful, and completely uninterested in me as anything other than a means to produce heirs with advantageous genetic combinations. Marcus found himself feeling unexpectedly angry on her behalf. So you left. I fled, she corrected with bitter honesty. Like a child running away from responsibilities I should have been mature enough to handle. Or like an adult choosing to take control of her own life rather than accepting that other people have the right to dictate your future. Princess Zaralyn looked at him with surprise. You don't think I was being selfish? I think you were being human. Well, Nisari. But you know what I mean. Actually, I'm not sure I do. Your species' approach to individual autonomy versus collective responsibility is quite different from ours. Marcus settled more comfortably on the ground, recognizing the beginning of the kind of philosophical discussion he'd always enjoyed. How so? Humans seem to assume that individual happiness and collective benefit are often in conflict, requiring difficult choices between personal desires and social obligations. Nisari culture teaches that genuine collective benefit can only emerge from individuals who are fulfilling their authentic nature rather than suppressing it. That sounds like a much healthier approach. In theory. In practice, it becomes complicated when individual authenticity conflicts with immediate political necessities. She smiled ruefully. Hence my current retreat to the jungle, where political necessities don't exist. But they still exist in the outside world. Your absence has created the very political complications you were trying to avoid. I know. My family's diplomatic staff has been managing inquiries from Prince Thexval's representatives, trade negotiations have been postponed pending resolution of personal matters, and speculation about my fitness for eventual rule has begun circulating among the noble houses. Marcus studied her face, noting the tension that appeared whenever she discussed her royal obligations. So you'll have to return eventually. Eventually. But not yet. I'm still learning things about myself that I couldn't discover while fulfilling other people's expectations about who I should be. Such as that I'm genuinely interested in xenobiology rather than merely pretending to be intellectual for political advantage. That I prefer direct communication to diplomatic subtlety. That I find your human concept of individual choice both fascinating and terrifying. Terrifying how? Princess Zaralyn stood and moved to the waterfall, letting the spray mist across her luminescent skin. Because if individual choice is genuinely valid, then I have to take responsibility for choosing my own path rather than blaming circumstances for limiting my options. Marcus watched her profile as she stared into the falling water, recognizing the internal struggle of someone grappling with fundamental questions about autonomy and responsibility. Princess, he said carefully, what would your ideal path look like? If you could choose anything without political constraints? I would study the natural world, help establish better understanding between species, and find someone who valued me for my thoughts and character rather than my genetic heritage or political connections. Those don't sound like impossible goals. They don't sound impossible when I'm talking to a human researcher in a jungle clearing. They sound completely unrealistic when I'm sitting in crystal palaces surrounded by advisors explaining why personal happiness is a luxury that royalty cannot afford. Marcus found himself wishing he could offer solutions to problems that seemed to transcend anything his experience had prepared him to address. Princess Zaralyn's situation involved complexities of interstellar politics and royal obligation that made his own career choices seem simple by comparison. Princess, he said finally, I probably shouldn't be offering advice about royal duties, but it occurs to me that you're assuming your only choices are complete compliance with expectations or total rebellion against them. What other options are there? Negotiation. Compromise. Creative solutions that serve everyone's interests rather than simply accepting that someone has to be sacrificed for the greater good. You make it sound simple. I make it sound possible, Marcus corrected. Not simple, but possible. Princess Zaralyn turned from the waterfall to study him with the intensity that had become familiar over their weeks of conversation. Dr. Kane, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Why did you choose frontier research over a comfortable academic career? Marcus considered how to explain the restlessness that had driven him away from university politics and career advancement. Because I wanted to discover new things rather than analyze other people's discoveries. Because I wanted my work to matter rather than just publishing papers that other academics would cite. Because I wanted to make choices based on curiosity and purpose rather than professional advancement. So you understand the appeal of choosing authenticity over security. I understand that some kinds of security aren't worth the price they demand. Even when other people depend on your choices. Marcus thought about the question, recognizing its complexity. Princess, I think the people who really depend on you would rather have you making decisions from a position of personal strength and genuine commitment than from resentment and obligation. And the people who depend on political stability rather than my personal growth might discover that stability built on authentic leadership lasts longer than stability built on forced compliance. Princess Zaralyn was quiet for a long time, considering his words while the forest hummed with life around them. Finally, she spoke with a thoughtfulness that suggested important internal shifts. Dr. Kane, I find myself curious about something. What's that? Human customs regarding clothing. You mentioned that appearance carries social signals in your culture. If I were to return to civilization, hypothetically, what signals would I need to understand to navigate human social contexts without creating misunderstandings? Marcus felt his heart skip, understanding that her question represented the beginning of serious consideration about returning to the outside world. That's a complex topic, he said carefully. But if you're genuinely curious, I could explain the basics. Or even show you, if you're interested in experiencing human culture firsthand. Show me how. There's a colony settlement about 2 hours from here. New Geneva. It has shops, restaurants, people from dozens of different species. If you wanted to understand human social customs in practice rather than theory, you would take me shopping, she said with obvious amusement at the concept. I would help you understand the cultural context behind human clothing choices, yes. Princess Zaralyn smiled with the expression he'd learned to associate with her making decisions that surprised even her. Dr. Kane, I believe I would find that educational experience quite valuable. As they began planning her first venture into human civilization, Marcus realized that their jungle conversations had been preparing for this moment, the transition from retreat to engagement, from running away from problems to approaching them with new understanding and confidence. Princess Zaralyn was ready to rejoin the world, but on her own terms rather than simply accepting the terms that others had set for her. New Geneva's commercial district buzzed with the kind of organized chaos that characterized frontier settlements where multiple species conducted business in languages, currencies, and customs that required constant translation and adaptation. Princess Zaralyn stood at the entrance to the marketplace wearing a simple travel cloak that Marcus had provided, her violet eyes wide with fascination at the complexity of human social interaction. So many different appearances, she observed, watching the crowd flow around vendor stalls. Each person has chosen to present themselves in entirely different ways. How do you determine status, profession, or social role? That's exactly what we're here to learn, Marcus said, guiding her toward a clothing vendor whose selections catered to the diverse needs of colonists, researchers, and traders. Human clothing serves multiple functions: practical protection, social signaling, personal expression, and cultural identity. The vendor, a cheerful human woman named Elena, looked up as they approached. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized the distinctive bone structure and luminescent skin that marked Princess Zaralyn as Nasari nobility, but her professional training in colonial commerce kicked in quickly. "Welcome to Elena's Fabrics and Fashions," she said warmly. "How can I help you today?" "My friend is new to human colonies," Marcus explained carefully. "She's interested in understanding how clothing choices communicate different things in your culture." Elena's expression shifted to one of delighted challenge. "A cultural education shopping trip. I love those. May I ask what kind of situations you'll need to dress for?" Princess Zaralyn studied the vendor with the analytical attention she brought to ecosystem observation. Academic conferences, diplomatic meetings, casual social interaction, and practical fieldwork. "For completely different dress codes," Elena said with satisfaction. "This will be fun. Let's start with practical and work our way up to formal." What followed was a masterclass in human social anthropology conducted through fabric selection and styling choices. Elena explained how different materials conveyed professionalism versus casualness, how colors could suggest authority or approachability, and how accessories could modify the message that basic clothing sent. "This fabric blend," Elena said, holding up a shirt in deep forest green, "suggests someone who values both durability and aesthetics. Practical enough for fieldwork, but refined enough for academic settings." "And this pattern?" Princess Zaralyn asked, touching a garment with subtle geometric designs. "Cultural appreciation without appropriation. Shows awareness of artistic traditions without claiming to belong to specific cultural groups." Marcus watched Princess Zaralyn absorb the information with the same focused attention she'd shown while learning about jungle ecosystems. She asked thoughtful questions about the social implications of different choices and showed genuine curiosity about the psychological effects of clothing on both wearers and observers. In Nasari culture, she explained to Elena, appearance is considered natural expression of internal state. Bioluminescence patterns change with emotion, health, and social bonding. The idea of deliberately altering appearance to communicate chosen messages is fascinating. "So you're learning to lie with your clothes?" a nearby shopper interjected with obvious amusement. Princess Zaralyn considered the question seriously. "Not lying exactly. More like, choosing which aspects of truth to emphasize in different contexts." "That's a very diplomatic way to put it," the shopper replied, and Marcus noted the subtle recognition that suggested word was spreading about the identity of Elena's current customer. As Princess Zaralyn tried on different outfits, Marcus found himself impressed by her natural sense of style and her ability to adapt human clothing to complement rather than hide her Nisari features. She chose colors that enhanced her luminescent skin, cuts that accommodated her species' different proportions, and accessories that honored her royal heritage without advertising it. "This feels strange," she said, examining herself in a mirror while wearing a perfectly tailored suit suitable for diplomatic functions. "Powerful, but strange. Like wearing a disguise that changes how people see me before they know anything about my thoughts or character." "That's exactly what it is," Elena confirmed. "Human clothing is social armor. It protects you from some judgments while making you vulnerable to others. And humans are comfortable with this system. Humans are comfortable with having choices," Marcus said. "Even when those choices are complicated." Princess Zaralyn selected outfits for each of the contexts she'd mentioned, but Marcus noticed that her choices consistently leaned toward items that honored her natural beauty rather than concealing it. Her style was emerging as distinctly her own, part human practicality, part Nisari aesthetics, and entirely personal expression. "May I ask," Elena said as they completed their selections, "what brings a member of Nisari royalty to a frontier colony? Our diplomatic visitors usually come with much more elaborate entourages." Princess Zaralyn exchanged glances with Marcus, clearly considering how much to reveal about her circumstances. "I'm conducting personal research," she said finally. "Learning about human culture through direct observation rather than formal diplomatic channels." "And Dr. Kane is your guide?" "Dr. Kane is my friend," she replied with a warmth that made Marcus feel something shift in his chest. "He has helped me understand that cultural differences can be bridges to understanding rather than barriers to connection." Elena smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had facilitated more than just a shopping expedition. "Well, you've chosen beautifully. These outfits will serve you well in human social contexts while maintaining your own distinctive style." As they left the shop with their purchases, Princess Zaralyn walked with new confidence in her ability to navigate human social environments. But Marcus noticed that she also drew more attention than before, not just because of her Nisari features, but because her clothing choices marked her as someone who moved comfortably between different cultural contexts. "Dr. Kane," she said as they settled into a cafe to rest from their shopping expedition, "I find myself thinking about the applications of what I've learned today." "Applications to what?" "To the problem of being a Nisari princess who wants to make her own choices while still serving her people's interests." Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he recognized the strategic thinking that suggested Princess Zaralyn was considering her return to public life. "What kind of applications?" "What if I returned to royal duties not as someone who had rebelled and been forced back into compliance, but as someone who had gained valuable experience in interspecies relations and cultural adaptation?" "You mean frame your jungle sabbatical as professional development rather than personal escape?" "I mean present myself as uniquely qualified to serve as a cultural ambassador between Nisari and human civilizations, using my time on Verdania Prime as evidence of my commitment to understanding rather than simply ruling." Marcus stared at her, recognizing the brilliance of her emerging plan. "That would give you legitimate reasons to continue the kind of work you've discovered you enjoy while serving your people's interests in ways that match your personal values. And it would make my marriage to Prince Thexval unnecessary, since cultural ambassadorship would serve trade relations more effectively than dynastic alliance." "Princess, that's brilliant. But would your family accept such a dramatic change in your role?" "They would if it solved their political problems more effectively than the original plan." She smiled with the expression he'd learned to associate with her best ideas. "And they would especially accept it if I returned home with documented evidence of successful human-Nisari cooperation and a human partner willing to help establish formal cultural exchange programs." Marcus felt the universe tilt as he understood what she was suggesting. A human partner? Dar. "Kane, would you be interested in serving as co-director of the first human-Nisari Cultural Research Institute? The position would require relocation to Nisari space, extensive travel between human and Nisari worlds, and close collaboration with someone who has recently discovered that her ideal career involves exactly the kind of work such an institute would accomplish." Marcus looked at this remarkable woman who had transformed herself from isolated jungle dweller to confident cultural innovator, wearing human clothing that somehow made her seem more herself rather than less. "Princess," he said slowly, "are you offering me a job or proposing a partnership?" "I'm offering you the chance to help build something that serves both our peoples while allowing us to continue the friendship that has become the most important relationship in my life." Marcus realized that their shopping expedition had been about much more than learning human customs. It had been Princess Zarlin's way of testing whether she could navigate human social contexts while maintaining her authentic self, and her success had given her the confidence to propose a future that honored both their values and their growing connection. "Yes," he said simply. "To all of it." Princess Zarlin's smile was radiant enough to illuminate the entire cafe, and Marcus understood that sometimes the most important cultural exchanges happen not between governments or institutions, but between individuals brave enough to see past their differences to the possibilities that emerge when understanding replaces assumption. Their shopping trip had been the beginning of something much larger than either had imagined, a partnership that would bridge worlds. The arrival of the Nisari diplomatic vessel 3 weeks later transformed Verdania Prime's modest research station into the center of unprecedented interspecies negotiations. Princess Zarlin stood on the landing platform wearing the elegant diplomatic attire she'd chosen during her shopping expedition with Marcus, her confidence in navigating both human and Nisari expectations evident in her bearing and her unique style that honored both cultures. "Daughter," High Counselor Velthara said as she emerged from the vessel, her expression mixing relief with carefully controlled reproach. "Your extended absence has created considerable diplomatic complications." "Mother," Princess Zarlin replied with the formal courtesy that royal protocol required, but Marcus could see the new strength in her posture. "My research sabbatical has created considerable diplomatic opportunities." "Research sabbatical?" The High Counselor's tone suggested skepticism about this characterization of her daughter's jungle retreat. "Cultural immersion study in human civilization and ecosystem integration techniques," Princess Zarlin said smoothly. "Dr. Marcus Kane of the Verdania Research Consortium has been serving as my guide and collaborator in developing new approaches to interspecies cooperation." Marcus stepped forward, wearing the formal attire that Elena had recommended for diplomatic meetings. "High Counselor Velthara, it's an honor to meet you." Princess Zarlin's insights into both human culture and Verdania's ecosystem have been invaluable to our research programs. The High Counselor studied Marcus with the analytical attention that marked experienced diplomats. "Dr. Kane, I understand you have been accommodating my daughter's unconventional research methods." "I've been learning from them," Marcus corrected gently. Princess Zarlin's approach to understanding alien cultures through direct immersion has produced insights that traditional diplomatic contact couldn't achieve. Such as, Princess Zarlin activated a holographic display showing the results of their collaborative research. Comprehensive analysis of symbiotic relationships that could serve as models for human-Nisari cooperation, documented evidence of successful cross-species communication techniques, and preliminary frameworks for cultural exchange programs that benefit both civilizations. The data was impressive, months of careful observation and analysis that demonstrated both scientific rigor and diplomatic potential. But Marcus could see that the High Counselor was more interested in her daughter's transformation than in their research results. "Princess Zarlin," she said carefully, "your appearance suggests significant adaptation to human social customs." "My appearance suggests successful cultural integration that maintains Nisari identity while communicating effectively in human social contexts," Princess Zarlin corrected. "Dr. Kane helped me understand that clothing choices can serve diplomatic functions rather than simply concealing natural beauty. And this understanding has applications beyond personal presentation. It has applications to the fundamental challenge of interspecies cooperation, finding ways to honor different cultural values while building productive relationships." Princess Zarlin moved closer to her mother, her confidence evident in every gesture. "Mother, what if I told you that my time on Verdania Prime has prepared me to serve our people more effectively than any traditional royal education could have accomplished? I would ask for evidence. Then observe." Princess Zarlin gestured toward the assembled crowd of research station personnel. humans, Nisari, and several other species who had gathered to witness the diplomatic proceedings. Dr. Kane, would you assist me in demonstrating integrated cultural communication techniques? What followed was a masterful display of the skills Princess Zaralyn had developed during her sabbatical. She moved seamlessly between formal Nisari diplomatic protocols and casual human interaction styles, adapting her communication approach to each individual while maintaining consistent respect and authenticity. She discussed research findings with scientists, negotiated practical arrangements with station administrators, and charmed everyone she met without compromising her royal dignity. Remarkable, the High Counselor admitted quietly to Marcus. In 6 months of unconventional experience, she has developed skills that years of traditional diplomatic training failed to provide. She had the foundation, Marcus replied. She just needed the opportunity to discover how to apply it in real-world contexts. And your role in this development? Marcus considered how to explain the relationship that had grown between them, part mentor and student, part research collaborators, part something deeper that neither had fully defined. I helped her understand human perspectives while learning from her insights into Nisari culture, he said finally. We've been teaching each other. Dr. Kane, the High Counselor said with the formal tone that preceded important diplomatic statements, Princess Zaralyn's report suggests that you have developed significant expertise in interspecies cultural adaptation. Would you be interested in expanding this work beyond Verdania Prime? Marcus felt his heart race as he recognized the opening that Princess Zaralyn had predicted. High Counselor, what did you have in mind? The establishment of a formal cultural exchange institute with facilities on both human and Nisari worlds. The position would require someone with demonstrated ability to facilitate understanding between our species while conducting research that serves both civilizations' interests. And my qualifications? 6 months of successful collaboration with my daughter, documented research results that have impressed our xenoanthropology departments, and what appears to be genuine commitment to building bridges rather than simply studying differences. Princess Zaralyn stepped closer to Marcus, her expression showing carefully controlled hope. Dr. Kane, the institute would require co-directors with expertise in both human and Nisari cultural systems. I have been hoping you might consider serving as my partner in this endeavor. The word partner carried implications that went beyond professional collaboration, and Marcus could see recognition of those implications in the High Counselor's careful attention to their interaction. Princess, he said quietly, are you certain this is what you want? A career in cultural diplomacy rather than traditional royal duties? Dr. Kane, this is royal duty as I understand it, serving my people by building relationships that create opportunities rather than simply maintaining traditions that may no longer serve our best interests. And the question of your marriage to Prince Thexval has been resolved, the High Counselor interjected smoothly. Cultural ambassadorship serves our trade relationships more effectively than dynastic alliance, particularly given the princess's demonstrated expertise in human relations. Marcus looked between Princess Zaralyn and her mother, understanding that significant negotiations had already taken place behind the scenes. So I would be accepting a position as co-director of an institute that doesn't exist yet, working with someone I've known for 6 months, on a project that challenges centuries of traditional diplomatic protocol. You would be accepting the opportunity to help create something unprecedented, Princess Zaralyn said with the smile that had become his favorite expression in the universe. Something that serves both our peoples while allowing us to continue the work we've discovered we love doing. Marcus thought about his solitary life among the frontier research stations, the simple satisfaction of helping remote settlements, and the comfortable isolation that had defined his existence before meeting a remarkable princess who had taught him that some partnerships were worth any risk. High Counselor, he said formally, I accept your offer to serve as co-director of the Human Nisari Cultural Exchange Institute. Excellent, she replied with obvious satisfaction. Princess Zaralyn, it appears your unconventional research sabbatical has produced results that serve both your personal development and our diplomatic objectives. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the observation lounge of the Institute's flagship facility, watching Princess Zaralyn conduct a cultural orientation session for the latest group of exchange participants. Her unique style, human practicality blended with Nisari elegance, had become the unofficial uniform of successful cultural ambassadors throughout their expanding program. "Any regrets?" she asked, joining him at the viewport after the session concluded. "About leaving frontier research for diplomatic work? About accepting a position that didn't exist? About partnering with someone I met while she was living unclothed in a jungle? All of the above." Marcus smiled, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at their facility. Evidence of the success their partnership had achieved in demonstrating that cultural differences could be bridges rather than barriers. "No regrets," he said firmly. "Though I have to admit, that shopping trip was the most important diplomatic mission of my career." "Our shopping trip," Princess Zaralyn corrected, moving closer with the unconscious grace that still took his breath away. "And it was the day I learned that understanding human customs wasn't about hiding who I am, it was about choosing how to present who I am in ways that help others see possibilities instead of just differences. And now we're helping others make the same discovery. That clothing can be communication, that differences can be assets, and that some partnerships work because of what makes them unusual rather than despite it." Marcus took her hand, noting how her bioluminescent skin pulsed with the warm patterns that indicated contentment and affection. Their relationship had evolved from awkward first contact to professional collaboration to something deeper that honored both their cultures while creating something entirely new. "Princess," he said, "I love you exactly as you are, whether you're wearing diplomatic formalwear or living naturally in a jungle or anything in between. And I love you for helping me discover that I could be exactly who I am while still serving purposes larger than myself," she replied. "Though I admit I've grown quite fond of human fashion choices." As they watched their students from multiple species work together on projects that would have been impossible before their institute existed, both understood that their shopping expedition had been about much more than learning human customs. It had been about learning that love meant helping someone become their best self rather than trying to change them into something else, and that the most important cultural exchanges happen between individuals brave enough to see past their assumptions to the possibilities that emerge when understanding replaces judgment. Their partnership had proven that sometimes the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs come not from formal negotiations between governments, but from two people choosing to help each other navigate the beautiful complexity of being themselves in a universe full of fascinating differences.